Hey, welcome everyone to another episode of the Jonathan Project Podcast, where iron is sharpening iron. And we're helping men navigate the complexities of this world around us. And we take the example of Jonathan and his good friend and future King David as the inspiration for our show. So if you want Jason and me to come out to a men's event, a church function, your business, and you found some inspiration from listening to the show, please reach out to us at thejonathanprojectpodcast@gmail.com. Again, thejonathanprojectpodcast@gmail.com. Jason, good morning. Welcome to the show.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
How you doing?
I'm doing okay. The weather has finally went back and it left here in Florida, and so it's back to Florida winter. It's about 70 degrees, and birds are chirping and skies are blue.
Well, it's supposed to get up to 60 today, so that's pretty good here. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, man, how's the week been?
It's been steady. Like I said, this has been my pause week before I head back into the work fight, so to speak, on Monday morning. So yeah, it's been good. Yeah.
How's the book?
I'm almost through. I have written like a madman. I was up against the wall as far as my editor is concerned. Shout out to Kelly. She's out there listening. I had about 2 weeks to the day, because today is February 1st, to get it to her. And so I'm happy to say that I'm 99% there now. Whereas about a month ago, I was about 30% there.
Yeah, I remember it was. I'm glad you're going forward. Well, look, I also want to give a shout out to Brendan. He's the guy that gave us the topic last week. Yeah. He also posted a video on Facebook, and I'm going to commend him for it. He basically, the video on Facebook said, "Hey, Jesus loves you, and God loves you. Jesus loves you, and if you want to talk to me, give me a call." It was that simple, and I was super proud of him. Took a step of faith. He's a young man. He's in his 20s, brand new father. And so very impressive. You know what I mean? Like he's putting it out there. So hats off to him, and really do appreciate that.
No, that's awesome though. Shout out to Brendan. So we have an interesting kind of conversation that we're going to have here, folks. We're going to talk about strong men of faith are needed when times get tough. And if you haven't noticed, ladies and gentlemen, things are a little rough here in America. Just writ large, prices of things are up. There's a lot going on nowadays. And I would say we're in hard times, right? And, as we look at these struggles that families are facing, I would even go and be bold enough to say it's not just an American struggle. It's a global one. But in times like these, strong men of faith are not optional. We've all heard the quote where, hard times make strong men, and strong men make weak times, and weak times make weaker men.
You're so close.
I was so close on that. And I was trying to hold it. I was trying to hold it together. But you get what I'm saying. And so we're going to talk about, why you need to be a strong man of faith in these times that are a little bit rough and a little bit challenging, and how that faith really has an impact as a man on the society and your families and everything else around us.
Yeah. You and I've talked this week, right? And things have shifted for us all, for everybody, right? Like certain things have come out. I swapped government agencies, and you and I've talked quite a bit about that.
Yeah.
And so forth. But here's, for listeners out there, this is part of the conversation that Colby and I've talked about, and encouraging one another and discussing. And this is something that in my studies and my thoughts are this. When Joseph was born, obviously, to Jacob, and he was the second youngest, right? And he really, or maybe was the youngest. I can't remember. I know Benjamin was right after that, or right around that time. But so anyway, long story short, his brothers were going to kill him, and Reuben says, let's just put him in his pit. Well, then when Reuben leaves, everybody leaves, and his brothers sell him into slavery. And next thing you know, Reuben comes back and can't rescue him. Well, Joseph, later we kind of see, hey, he goes through this. He's sold to Potiphar, then he goes to jail, and he comes back, and he is the second or third in charge in Egypt. But when his brothers show up, it says, hey, you meant this for evil, but God meant it for good.
Yeah.
Look, we kind of get to skip. And it's interesting, in TV shows and stuff, you're like, oh, the scene cuts. And it's not that awkward what happens right after that comment or right after that moment. But life goes on. And in Joseph's life went on. After he was thrown in the pit, sold into slavery, there's a time. There's a time period of going through. But and those hard times came, and there you go. He needed to step up, and he does in his life, right? Like he didn't hold on to the bitterness.
Yeah.
He became, and he is recorded as quite a man of faith.
Yeah. And that's a good example of pointing out why this episode, right? Why do we want to talk about when those hard times hit, what you're going to face as a man and how you need to respond. And really, if you don't have that armor that your faith brings, then you're kind of left exposed, and you can find yourself kind of falling away. Masculinity, being a man, especially in, American society, which is what both of us are, intimately familiar with, is kind of been challenged over the last 4 or 5 plus years or more.
Yeah.
And I think what it leads to is a lot of men kind of are searching out there for community. I'll give an example. There's a gentleman that, I'm going to meet up with here probably in the next couple of weeks, but he has found himself overnight being a single dad. He has found himself overnight trying to put the pieces together of his family. And the main thing that he said, he's like, I really just need some community. I really wish I had some guys to I could talk to.
Yeah.
And I think what I found, and I know we're going to address this a little bit later in the episode, is one of the big reasons why men are kind of moved away from Christianity here in America is this principle called discipleship. And it's not this unmasculine thing to build community with men and row together in the same kind of fashion. Jesus modeled this impeccably, where he picked 12 random men that I don't think anyone in modern society would have picked to be his disciples. And he mentored them. He took them from being weak men and he discipled them into being strong men of faith. And those strong men of faith then moved on through hard times to build other strong men of faith. And you see that cycle continue to repeat. So discipleship is a key part of being a strong man and retaining your faith and helping future generations have that.
A lot of people think that when you become a Christian, life ought to work out, Well, and it does in the end. But let's be candid. It does in the end. There's a lot of ground between here and there, just like with Joseph. There was a lot of ground between being sold into slavery and then being the third in charge. You and I were kind of talking. I was driving in the other day, and Charles Stanley had a sermon on about, the house, the 2 houses built on the foundations.
Mm-hmm.
And what's important for men to realize is that when you begin this discipleship, is both those houses, the rains came and the floods rose on both houses, the one built on the rock and the one built on the sand. But only one of those survived. As you get ready to disciple people, that's it. As you get ready to take on that leadership role, you have to have that forethought and that commitment that at the end of this is always keep that strategic goal in mind of where we're going.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Jason, without a doubt, as we talked about last week's episode of influences, when you look at what, traditional masculinity, biblical kingdom man kind of masculinity, it centers on being a provider, a protector, and then the spiritual leader. All 3 of those elements have been challenged in multiple ways as our culture has shifted to this thing where everything goes, everything feels good, and the toxic male is the one who tries to stand up and to create that societal wall, that protector. Provider has changed dramatically. You have people doing all kinds of perverse things to provide for themselves, and everyone's supposed to agree with that. Men are supposed to agree with that. Families are supposed to be structured around such kind of activities. And what you end up with is, a hyper individualistic kind of focus as a
Mm-hmm.
society when men have been relegated to being passive observers versus active engagers of how the culture should be defined and how families should be structured and cared for and protected and guided from a spiritual sense.
It's interesting. It's very few cultures that evolve to the point that where being that protector is a bad thing, right? Like it's kind of weird, you know?
Yeah.
No one appreciates a warrior till the enemy is at the door, right? And that's
Yeah.
not just a physical enemy, but that could be a spiritual enemy, that things like that, right?
Absolutely.
And I think sometimes when life is too good, we get to coasting and we realize that, man, maybe we don't need God. Maybe we did this all by ourselves. And that's where that easy times make weak people, right? But it needs
Yeah.
to continue to build and be those discipling during those times as well.
No, you're right. And, Jeremiah 35:18-19 says, highlights and talks about the importance of passing down faith to the generations. There's this really common thing of wanting to bash generations nowadays. But I'm like, if we really took a look at the mirror, if you're older than the younger generation, you might be a parent, uncle, aunt, grandparent to that younger generation. So you should probably pause and take a look at what impact you had on that younger generation person that you're bashing and why they're on the railroad tracks that they are. But we don't like to do that. It's easier just to point out the negative and say, oh, this generation is softer and weaker. Well, I think, the greatest generation as society has labeled that generation, not necessarily that they were, but they probably looked back and said, we walked across Europe and through the Pacific and my children are slap weak. Well, it goes to the quote that I completely butchered is that those very strong men and those women that held down the fort from an industrial standpoint, they created some really great and golden times. And that translated not necessarily to passing down those spiritual things that Jeremiah is talking about and making sure that strong faith. You go to Europe on vacation, the cathedrals are beautiful. But if you talk to some of the locals, the older folks especially will tell you like, yeah, we might have a service here, actual church service on like a holiday. But other than that, the young people have no foggy clue. And I think increasingly in churches, we're seeing that here in America, as I call it, the great dechurching has started, where only 20% of Americans, according to Gallup, attend church weekly. 54% of men that were raised in Christian homes, according to Pew Research, are now unaffiliated. So when you look at that impact of faith being removed so dramatically, you have to ask a couple questions. One, what's the impact? And then two, where are all of these men and people going to find their sense of truth, their sense of values, their sense of morality? And when we look around and you see certain things happening, well, there's your sign, right?
You highlight some good points. So when we talk about generations, I did a bunch of research years ago on generations, and the truth is every generation believes the one coming after them are weak. I wished I'd have grabbed it. I have in my possession a 1917 World War I PT manual, right? And I also have a 1942 training circular for when they said, hey, we need to change how we conduct physical fitness to meet the needs, and then the 1946 version. I don't think it's written in the 42, but it's definitely written in the 46 and the 1917. It says this current generation is weak. Both of those. They said the industrial machines have made them weak. Now, when I think of my grandfather, weak is not what comes to mind. Like he fought in North Africa all the way up into Italy. That was not it, right?
Yeah.
I think about the World War I generation, and none of them do I think, man, that's a weak generation, right? Like seeing how they met that challenge and so forth. But it's that natural inclination to divest of the younger generation. But the truth is it's that lie that we keep telling ourselves, right?
Yeah.
I think during hard times, a lot of guys come back. They're extremely grateful to be out of hard times, right? And, we think about the 1950s being that golden era, but in reality, we just had a pause. If the world wants to know, we just were untouched by World War II. The rest of the world was dealing with the aftermath. So it gave us that natural lull and, this is the golden era, the happy days era, right?
Yeah. No, you're right, Jason. There is a tremendous impact when men take a seat. When you high-fived on the objective, wherever it is, you're successful now. Mm-hmm. You have a lot of money in your bank account or whatever you define as success. And then you look around that my only goal now is to pass off material knowledge and not the hard work, not the spiritual discipline that it requires to maintain such quote unquote success. Then that's what happens. Here's the one from Promise Keepers in Baptist Press. When a father doesn't practice faith, Christian faith, only 1 in 50 children will remain faithful. And why does this matter? Our society is very fragmented. It's unstable when men abandon spiritual leadership. Why? Because despite what critics or cynics may say, you can't define your own morality in yourself and then look to apply that to the world and hope for the best. Your morality has to be something that comes from outside of yourself. And whether people want to acknowledge it or not, that's what happens. And you see this being modeled throughout society. There is time and time again of cases of where we have prioritized attention seeking, putting the self on the pedestal for whatever the self may do. And there's numerous examples, but let me give you a local one that happened this past week. A young lady at the elementary school in our neighborhood who had a cell phone. She's in middle school, so you can guess the age range. Mm-hmm. She decided, because she wanted to go viral and wanted to increase her Instagram account followers, to post that there was an active shooter threat outside the school. And so this complete school, a K through 8 school, was completely locked down. There were parents that were absolutely, as you can imagine, terrified.
Yeah.
And the end result is what came out and was released to all the parents in the neighborhood in different places is the young lady was seeking more attention and felt that she was not getting it. She was promptly arrested, and her parents are also facing some legal battles now, as you can imagine. I say this is because there is a complete breakdown and how and what is important in that home. But I would be argued to say that there are probably dozens of people out there listening that might listen to this in the future, and you look at the broader society, a lot of people that's what's happening. And this is what I'm saying. When men don't step up and act as this bridge of saying, hey, it can't always be about you. It's not always should be about you. Mm-hmm. And when you look at the real principles, not when you ran into a bad Christian and what a bad Christian or a bad church or somebody endpoint, but when you look at the principles that Jesus espoused, it was about bringing goodness and truth and revelation, not about the self, but about something greater than the self, right? And that's where we're at right now. When we have men retreating from where their God-given purpose is in society, you find more and more of these things are going to happen.
So a couple of things. Years ago, and I like listening to John Kearson. Well, the thing is his sermon was preached in the 90s. And he goes through the psychology behind, he goes, hey, in the 40s, this magazine, I think it was Time magazine, and then it was Life magazine. He goes through the 50s, and it goes through the most popular thing, right? And he goes down to, Life, People, or Lifetime, or whatever, Time, Life, People, and it keeps getting more and more narrow. And he goes, I'm going to make a prediction. If you want to make $1 million, and back then $1 million is a lot, still a lot to me because I don't have it, but it's, yeah. He goes, if you want to make $1 million, all you got to do is get a magazine in which a mirror pops out, and it's all about the person. Well, and then you look at how we have portrayed social media, Facebook, Instagram, all those things. It's all about you, right? It's all about the individual. And we put the individual above the collective. And, something you said earlier about when you get to the end of your time as a husband, as a dad, it's more than being a physical provider, right? Those are temporary things. And I thought about that, and I thought, one of the strategies they do when you are planning out your life, they go, okay, tell me your 1-year goal, your 5-year goal, your 10-year goal. Hey, dads, how many of you have an eternity goal? What do you think about that? Is success defined by how much your children have in their accounts, or is it that they have a relationship with Jesus Christ and they're set for eternity? We think about the term eternity, and it gives us this illusion that it's way off, right?
Yeah.
And it's not. You get a date to enter into eternity. That's the date you are preparing for. And if you as a dad, or you as a husband, or you as a good friend, if you're trying to disciple and lead people, if you don't have a goal, it's like that saying, if you don't have a destination, any road will get you there. Yeah, because you're going nowhere. You have to have the foresight in the present situation to be able to say, hey, 5 years from now, I need this person to be strong. I need them to help them. You hit the nail on the head. There are a lot of guys who feel very alone, very isolated. They're struggling with, this, man, I was raised to be this kind of man. Now you're telling me it's toxic. Now you're telling me that holding doors is wrong. I had a lady one time explain to our workforce that she didn't like for men to hold the door for her. I'm like, do you want me to shut it on you? I'm kind of confused.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just going to lean into what I think's right, what I know is right. And you can always go in a different door. I'll just hold the door for everybody and you can go in another one.
I know you're right, Jason. And,
right.
As I think about this, let's look at it from a worldly standpoint. I found this quote from the Atlantic magazine, not a Christian magazine at all. And the author of this article is pronounced by themselves to be agnostic at best and probably borderline atheist. And this is what this individual said is, religion for all its faults works a bit, and religion in particular, subquotes, Christianity for all its faults works a bit like a retaining wall to hold back the destabilizing pressure of American hyper-individualism. Now, this is someone who doesn't believe, but they come to see, as there has been this constant, you can't pray at school, you can't have FCAs, you can't have X, Y, and Z go on. You have more women in the church serving and doing things than men. If you look at on a Sunday morning, as these statistics have, that I quoted have proved out, there's less and less men. And what this atheist, agnostic, borderline person has said is, well, what does that have had an impact on American society?
Mm-hmm.
And we see it, this hyper individualist, and where my truth, as you've heard so many people use from media talking heads, etc., the truth in American society seems to be a variable, which it is not, which translates to family structures have become more weak.
Mm-hmm.
Children are rudderless, lack the discipline that fathers provide, safe, effective discipline to say, hey, it's not always about you. It's about, serving. And it's about us living a life that's pleasing to the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, which gives you a sense of purpose, which helps you become the best version of the self that you can as a family, as a wife, as a husband, as a mother, as a daughter. And, right now we are adrift. And you have men that are searching. There's a reason why the self-help industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry. This is why you have men flocking in droves to influencers and talking heads and different figures, because they are searching and they're craving that discipleship that strong men of faith need to stand up and provide.
You said something, and I think as a good leader, and I learned this a long time ago as a sergeant major, that my position was more than me, right? Like it counted more than me. My position counts more than me. As a dad, my position counts more than me. The maturity of that is you got to know how other people perceive you and how you impact the environment. As a dad, if you are constantly looking for the next most funny, inappropriate show, that's the standard you're setting for your kids, right? Now, pick whatever TV show that you'd like, right? And by what you advocate for, you set the standard. I'm not saying don't have a sense of humor, but what I am telling you is, as a dad, understand the things you say and the things you do have greater impact than what you think. the very famous TV show with Talladega Nights, whatever the movie, right? And Ricky Bobby goes, "But Dad, you told me if I wasn't first, I was last." And he goes, "Ricky, I was probably high that day, right?" And that's a good example. And it's comical. I see you laughing, and everybody else will too. But it's a great example of, hey, man, think about the things you say, right? You're a dad. God put you there. God did not orchestrate it where the kids were the parent.
No.
They didn't God did not orchestrate time where you and your kid were going through middle school together. God put you there to shine that light through the gray fog and go, hey, this is the right and left limits. Don't go off the cliff. All right. Like, that's being a leader. Like, when you talk about being a leader, I've got a goal and we're going to get there. And whatever that goal is, because I got a destination in mind, I'm going to nest all my efforts in behind it.
Yes, sir.
It may be unpopular at first to say prayer at supper table with your family, if you're out there right now, but give it a whirl, right? You don't, as a leader, I don't need everybody's buy-in to tell me I'm right.
No.
That's not it. Like, think back to Joshua when he goes across the thing at Jericho. I love that. Thank you for that pearl of wisdom, by the way, Colby. Yeah, the angel goes, man, I'm not on your side. I'm not on their sad. I'm on God's side.
I'm on my side. Yeah.
I'm on God's side. This is where I'm at. Because
Yeah.
you as a leader, that's it.
Yeah. No, you're right. And, as we come to our closing segment, what I would leave with, man, is, something. And I would ask you to listen to Jonathan's Leftovers, as there's going to be a little bit more that we're going to put on your plate that we can't put in this main episode. But, if men are leaving, where do the strong men kind of enter this fight? And I think discipleship is the biggest thing that I would say. It doesn't have to be this crazy detailed. I'm pulling out my devotional. I'm pulling out my Strong's Concordance, and I'm going to waylay some guy. It can be sitting down and have a cup of coffee with a guy that's just going through something, and you showing up and being that voice and being that light. It will turn the tide. Brotherhood. Me and this gentleman here, we live it and model it, and we don't necessarily probably are even the best, but iron sharpens iron. Proverbs 27:17. If you do not have a Jonathan in your life, you don't have someone, men out there listening, single moms trying to find someone for your sons, the Boys and Girls Club, YMCAs or something, get someone in that person's life, because there's nothing like being accountable, having someone that is not going to just tell you it's all sunshine and roses, and that can help refine you. And that's what God asks us to do. And taking ownership.
Mm-hmm.
Guys, we just have to. You can't be worried about being popular as a family man, as a father, as a husband. That's just not how this works. A business leader, fathers and husbands, leaders, we have to lead by example, as Jason said, and more importantly, as Jesus demonstrated very clearly for us. And here's a quote that I won't screw up, because this is the one that I wrote down for the show. Hard times forge men of strong faith. Men of strong faith disciple weak men, and discipled weak men grow into strong men of faith, and the cycle repeats. So if you're struggling to find a godly mentor, go to your local church, reach out, email us. There's a lot of programs out there that really want to link men up and help them find community nowadays in a society that is increasingly telling you should be isolated on an island and not leading. If you're strong in faith, invest in others. It could be something as simple as turning them on to this podcast. And this is not a shameless plug, but this is just one venue of us talking about iron sharpening iron. And there's a lot of other great podcasts, a lot of other great things out there that you can invest and help give to other men. And then be the man your family and community need in that time of need. We're all eggs, besides my friend here who has chickens and might be the richest man in America. Like eggs, which I like, they're expensive. All right. So there are hard times. There are people going through things all around us that need men who follow Jesus Christ to step to the plate and knock it out the park. Jason, I'll turn it over to you for any other closing thoughts.
No, you're absolutely right. One of the things that we have to remember is one of the key things that Satan's strategy is this isolation thing, right? Division and isolation. And he's not very happy when men come together, because it's like the Bible says, two or more of you are gathered in my name, there I am, right? Be accountable. and you need somebody in your life, and you need to disciple people that life's not about your feelings. Oh, hey, yep, I can't believe that person said that. You need to retaliate back. Nope. What does Jesus say?
Yes.
Jesus says, die to yourself. So
awesome. Well, folks, that is yet another episode of the Jonathan Project podcast, where we are trying to help men navigate this tough and complex thing called life. If you want to find this episode and any episode, they drop every Tuesday morning at 6 a.m. Eastern time, or wherever you're at when 6 a.m. strikes. You can find them on Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple, all kinds of places you can find them. We also have a TikTok page now where we put up a lot of previews. We put up little snippets from the show. Again, trying to reach men, families, wherever they're at. That's what we're trying to do. If you found this inspirational, please reach out to us at thejonathanprojectpodcast@gmail.com. Again, thejonathanprojectpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear your comments. If you're wanting prayer, or as we put out there, if you're looking for resources to help you connect with other men that are going to help you become a strong man of faith or help you get through a present crisis, please reach out to us. We'd be more than willing to help link you up with some of those. Jason, again, thanks for your time this morning. And yeah, I'll see you on Jonathan's Leftovers for everybody out there that knows. We're going to talk a little bit more, give you a little bit more on that plate. But yeah, thanks, folks.
All right. See you.
All right. Bye.